If the oil isn't milky, it shouldn't be a head gasket. That's what somebody commented on one of my previous videos, but in this video, I want to show you why that's not always the case. And we're going to use this little drawing for an example. So first of all head gaskets are kind of different, but they all basically have the same thing, right? This is for a 4-cylinder. These are going to be your cylinders, 1, 2, 3, 4. Then you're going to have all these little channels, and they're going to be oil or coolant depending on how the design is set up. And then these are all going to be like your bolts that, hold your head to the block. So having a blown head gasket is going to really depend on how the head gasket actually blows. So in this video, we're just going to pretend that these are coolant passages and these are oil passages. And then again, like I said, this is the cylinder. So first, if the head gasket blows between the oil passage and the cylinder to where oil gets down into your cylinder, that's when you're just going to start burning oil. And you're going to diag that by the color of the smoke that's coming out of the car, and you'll probably have a misfire on that cylinder. Now, in the video that I was talking about, if the head gasket blows between the coolant and the cylinder, and then you can either get a little bit of coolant going into the cylinder, which again will cause a different color smoke and maybe a rough running condition. But what happens sometimes is that as the piston is coming up in the cylinder, it forces air through this passage into the coolant, and that's going to give you bubbles in your reservoir. But the coolant going into the cylinder might not be so much that you're going to see a huge difference in the color of smoke, especially during the wintertime when it's hard to tell if it's just from being cold and your engine running. Now, if the head gasket blows between the oil passageway and the coolant like this, that's where your milkshake brings all the boys to the cars. Because this is where either oil mixes with coolant or coolant mixes with oil. Either way, you could have it in either situation. Either the oil is milky or the coolant is milky. So in the video that I was trying to diag over text messages and stuff like that, basically they were getting bubbles, not all the time, but here and there coming out of the coolant. So I was thinking it might be a head gasket where it's cracked between the cylinder block and the coolant passageway, where it's pushing air into the system and bubbling up in the reservoir. And the easiest way to test this is to just get a block tester kit, which is basically just a cylinder that looks something like this. That you're going to put some special fluid in here. It's like a purple fluid, and you kind of fill it up to here, and then you suck some of the air out of the reservoir through this. So you stuff this down in your reservoir cap, suck some air through it, and if the color of the fluid changes from purple to yellow, you know they have a bad head gasket because it's getting exhaust gases, right, coming up through the coolant system. Which would mean you either have a bad head gasket like this, where it's cracked between the cylinder and coolant passageway, or you actually have a cracked block somewhere to where the exhaust gases are still getting into the coolant somehow. But just because you're getting milkshakes inside of your oil or your coolant doesn't mean that is a head gasket either. And in my next video, I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about.